In this video, we're going to be taking a look at how we can use the primitive system within inside of Zbrush to lay out a base form for whatever it is that we're going to sculpt. And in this example, I'm going to show you how to create a set of arms. If I turn on the polyframe, you can see here, this system makes it really easy for you to keep individual shapes. And we're going to be talking about polygroups and how easy it is for you to be able to show and hide different various parts of this. And then that will make it very easy for you to be able to take these pieces, show them or hide them, be able to mask them. And then with the gizmo tool, we can go ahead and we can put basically the equivalent of a temporary bone in here. Okay, and then at that point you basically have like an armature in the computer that you can pose and put in the position that you want, and then after you're done with that, you can turn that into dynamesh, and then you can start sculpting on it. So you can see here is a final result of something where I took that model and I pushed it to the next level and then started to actually sculpt on there and then build in the anatomical details. So let's go over all the different tools and techniques to get this set up and have you doing a better job blocking out your models from the very beginning so you can really work on those primary shapes that will lead into better secondary and tertiary shapes. So let's go ahead and get started. So for this example, we're going to use the Dynasphere 128. So you can just hit the command key, open this up, go to Projects, find the Dynasphere 128, double click on that, and you should be able to open this up. So I'll tap X, I do have symmetry on, I'll tap S, make my brush size a little bit larger. And for this, I'm going to turn this into a torso shape. So I'm going to use the Damien standard brush. I do like to have the brush pretty large for this. If I hold down Alt, it'll build a shelf up like this. So I can drag a shape like that. And if I just click and drag, that'll carve in. We can do something like this. I'm going to do a ridge for where the shoulders might be, something in here like that. And then I will hold down Alt and then click and drag out right here like that. And if we want to do a chest shape, we can hold down Alt and then click and drag out here. And maybe I'll just dig in just a little bit there. If I dig in here like that and then hold down Alt and then raise that up, we can get a shape going something like that. So I'll just hold down Control and then remesh, and you can see what it's going to do there for me. Now I do like to use this clay polish. If you take a look on the interface over here, it's actually under geometry, and right above dynamesh is the clay polish, and you can click that and you can see how that'll sharpen those features up quite a bit like that. Okay, and I'll get rid of the mask on there. So that should be enough for the torso shape. So the next thing I'm going to do is go to subtool, and I'm going to append what is going to be the shoulder shape for that. But before I do that, I'm just going to rename this real quick and call this torso. Okay, and then I'm going to use the append and then click and drag out slowly, and you can see this is the sphere 3D. So this is one of their primitives, but as soon as you append it as a subtool, it will automatically just turn that into a mesh that you can sculpt on. Instead of clicking the button, this Make Polymesh 3D for a primitive, if you do it as a subtool, it'll bring that in. So I'm just going to put this on the gizmo tool. I'll put it on the move tool, make sure it's selected on here, and we can rename this. We can call this arm like that, and I'll just push this off to the side, scale it down, and then push it up here, and then maybe scale down just a little bit more, push it in, and then this is going to be the beginning of the arm shape that we're going to make here. Okay, now that we have that shoulder shape created, I wanted to show you this. If we put it on the gizmo tool and you don't have a mask on something and you don't have subdivision levels on something, if you hold on Control, you can click and drag out a copy of something. So I can just keep dragging out copies of this, but I'll just drag out one, hold down Control, drag it out like this, and this becomes a new shape that you can start to work with. So we could scale this and rotate it and everything else like that. But the interesting thing is, if you have it on the gizmo tool, you can see this gear icon up here for settings, and you can actually change change it from one model to one of these primitive types. So I'll go ahead and put this on the poly cylinder like this, and then you'll notice that you have these cones that you can actually click and drag on. So you can actually take these and divide them up, and because I'm going to eventually turn this into dynamesh, I want this to be like a really clean surface, so I'm just going to click and drag this up to 100 here, and I can click on this gear icon again, switch it over to the Gizmo 3D, and then now I can rotate this thing around. So if you hold down shift, you can snap the degree increments of how you're rotating this thing. We could scale this thing up. So I'm going to build a upper arm structure like this. I'm just going to rotate it this way and then push it out here like this, and I'm going to get an angle that goes back just a little bit and then push it within through here. Maybe make this thing just a little bit longer like that, maybe push it right there. Okay, so we've got that. The cool thing is we've already taken a look at, if we hold down control and then click and drag out, we can make a copy of this. So if you are making mechanical things or hydraulics or stuff like that, it could be pretty easy to make these shapes and get them to be pretty accurate with each other for that. Okay, so at the elbow area, I want another sphere, so we can go within here, and there are two different sphere types. There's this polysphere right here, and if we take a look at that and we drag out the divisions on this, you can see it's basically like the same kind of setup that you would have if you took a cube and you divided it. That cube will turn into a sphere, so that's what this is has going on for that. So I'm just going to drag this up to 100, 100, and then 100 for that, and then that's going to be nice and smooth. I'll put this back on here, put on the Gizmo 3D, and then I can scale this thing down like this, right through here. Maybe I push it down a little bit further, like right and through here. Okay, and what is actually going on here, if we hold down control and then click and drag, we'll release our mask on here. If we turn on polyframes, you can see that it's making different objects, and each one's got a different poly group on it. Now if you hold on control and shift and you click on a poly group, you can show just that particular group. If we hold down control shift and click on it again, it'll start to give us like the inverse of that, and then we can hold down control shift and keep clicking. And if we want to get the inverse of what we've got going on here, we hold down control shift, and then you can drag in the open viewport to give an inverse that way. Okay, so what I would like to do, I want to steal this cylinder here and duplicate that. So with polygroups, the selection thing makes it really easy to hold down control shift, click on that. I can hold down control shift, click here. I can hold down control shift and then just drag and do an inverse like that. Now hold down control and then click, and that will make a mask of whatever is visible like that. If you hold down control and then release like that, you can see it's going to release the mask. Now if I hold down control and then drag a marquee, you can mask bar and marquee like that. But it's just very simple just to click and make a mask of whatever's visible like that. Now if I hold down control shift and then bring back my selection, you can see that if I turn off the polyframe for this, these two are masked now, and then this is not. So I can put this on the gizmo tool, and if I want to, I can just hold down control and I can click and then I can drag out a copy here like that, and then I can just rotate this down. Then maybe I push this back up through here like this, and maybe we want this angle here. And for this one, I want this to be a little bit longer than the upper arm, not too terribly longer, but a little bit, and I'll scale it down just to be a little bit thinner like that. Okay, so again, we could use that technique that we just did to isolate the sphere and get that. If we wanted to be the exact same sphere that we have here, we could hold down control shift, click on that, mask it, hold down control shift, click, and that'll bring everything back. And then I need the inverse of this, so I can hold down control, and click, and that'll do the inverse, or you can hit control I, and then I could move this and do it that way. So that's one thing we could do, or we could do this. And I'm running into this situation where because I duplicated the upper arm and made this into the lower arm, they have the same exact polygroup information. Okay, so let me tell you a little bit about the polygroup stuff, and I think this will be helpful. So if we go to the polygroups area, if you hit Control W, the hotkey for this is basically group visible. So you can see that's going to turn everything into one big giant polygroup, and if we move and hold down control, it's going to drag out a copy of everything. Not what we want. Okay, if I hit undo, I get back to this situation. Now what I got here is I have control shift, and if I click on that, that's going to give me these two, because they are sharing the same polygroup information. But what if I want this to be a polygroup and this a polygroup? Well, they do have this thing called auto groups within here, and that will just take whatever is on its own island and it'll turn it into its own polygroup. So this is basically, it is one object, but it's this is like an object within an object, right? So it's got this piece, this piece, this piece, and they aren't welded together, so they are their own separate islands. So because of that, I can do this auto groups, and it'll give me a polygroup per thing. Okay, now I like to have that as a hotkey. Again, the hotkey for group visible is Control W, so I wanted to make it a hotkey for Control Shift W for this, right there, like that, like you see. To make a hotkey, super easy. Hold on Control Alt, and then you can click on this. I've already got it made, so if you hold on Control Alt, click on that, you'll see some text up here, and it says, you know, use your key combination that you want to store a hotkey, and all you'd have to do is hit Control Shift W at that point, and then that would make a hotkey for you. Now, if you want that to stick and you want it to store, you can go to Preferences, go to Hotkeys, click Store. That'll store your hotkey information for you. And then I like to save the hotkeys after that, and I store it on the cloud. And that way, if I need to change computers or anything ever happens, new version, whatever that might be, I can always go and load those hotkeys in a little bit later. Okay, so now I have this going on here. I can hold down Control Shift, and I'll make this my selection for this. I'll tap Control on the screen like that, and then hold down Control Shift and bring everything back. I'll hit Control I to inverse, and I know this is a lot of hotkeys and everything else like that, but really once you learn these and kind of get going with them, it's pretty simple to do these operations. So I'm going to hold on Control, click and drag out for this, and then on this time I'm going to change this into Sphere 3D, and we'll just take a look at what that looks like as a difference. So this one's got divisions this way, and it's got divisions this way as well, and it also has this thing that'll allow you to you know, clip the sphere this direction, and you can also clip the sphere this direction. So maybe that might come in handy. I think I used that for the top of a foot or something like that at a different point. So again, I'll put it on the gizmo tool right here, click that little gear icon, put on gizmo 3D, then I'll push this thing down, and at this point maybe push this here for like a wrist structure like that, and then I'll hold down Control and drag out another copy of this, and then this one I'm going to just scale out a little bit and then rotate this thing down just a bit and through here, maybe do that. And then I'm going to turn these into fingers, so I'll hold down Control and then drag out for this, and then I'll make these a lot longer, pull it down like this, and then I will push this over. Just like that, and through there. And now I'm going to spend just a little bit of time and make this look a little bit more specific, because I'm going to duplicate this finger a couple different times. So I'm just going to go out to the side and maybe raise this up just a little. I'm going to need to find just the right angle of this. So I think I'll go something like here, like that, and I'll use the inflate to make the end of this like this a little bit more, build this up and through here, and then maybe I'll use the Damien standard, and I'll cut through here, hold down Alt on the top, and you can see starting to build that shape that you see there for that, like that. Okay. And then at that point, I'll just put it back on the gizmo tool, hold down Control, drag out a copy. This one I'll make a little bit larger, rotate it down just a little bit, push it down this way, like that. Re-rotate it in, and hold down Control, and drag out a copy. This one's going to be a little bit smaller. And I'm not going to make a human hand, so we'll only do three fingers for this, like that. And I'll rotate this down like that a little bit more. Push this in, and then I'll hold down Control and then drag out for this. And I'll push this up and through here. Right here. And I'll make this a little bit shorter, and then push that in something like that. Okay. And again, we got another situation where we've got, because we duplicated that, all the same polygroup. So again, if we use our hotkey that we did, I can hit Control-Shift-W, and that'll make a polygroup for everything. And again, that's going to make it really easy for me to use polygroup information and select that stuff. Okay. So one of the cool things about this is one model. So if I put on the move brush, I can start to have a big effect on everything. So I can push and pull in through here. Maybe I get some kind of bending going on through here, like that, right? I still have the ability to mask a certain area, right? So we just hold down Control-Shift, click on that, Control-Click, Control-Shift-Click to bring everything back. Just Control-Click on there to inverse, and then we can start to move this thing around like that. I'm starting to build up a more specific shape for the shoulder. I wanted to show you this. So like it's possible to use this as kind of like a little mannequin structure. And if I wanted to join this all together, we could use dynamesh for that. So if we do this, if we go to geometry, we go to dynamesh. I'm going to put the resolution up to about 500 or so. And if we click dynamesh, that would join everything together. It's still got the polygroup information, but then I can start to smooth this out and treat it as if it's one model and start to sculpt on it. So that's kind of cool. But if I hit undo and go back, if I wanted to use dynamesh on this stuff, but I still want to keep these different parts and pieces, I can turn on groups and I can click dynamesh, and it will dynamesh it to whatever that resolution is. Let's put that back up to 500. And now I'm working in dynamesh, but I still have the ability to keep these as separate parts and pieces like that. So I do think that's a pretty powerful way to work, and I can just kind of smooth some of these things out. On my interface, I've got the mirror and weld. And if you hold down Control over these, you can see where this sits. So this is under deformation mirror, and mirror and weld sits under geometry mirror and weld. So I'm going to put it on mirror, then mirror and weld like that, and then now I got two arms that I can start working with. And if I put on the gizmo tool, I can hold down Alt, and I'll click on this, go to unmask center point, and I'll hit the hold down Alt and click on the refresh or reset, and now I'll hold on Alt and I can click and drag this around to change the pivot point of this, and I can change the pivot point here, go to the side, hold down Alt, and I can drag it here and match the arm a little better like that, and treat this as if this is a bone. So if I tap X and I turn on symmetry, I should be able to rotate this out and do something like this, and I can start to treat it kind of like a mannequin at that point, right? And so if we wanted to do something like, maybe we've raised the arms up and we want to change the overall arm position, if we hold on Control-Shift, this is where we start to use the polygroup. So what I do for this is hold on Control-Shift, I'll click on that, hold on Control-Shift, click on this piece again, and then that puts me in this mode where it basically gave me like the inverse, right? So now I don't see that part, and if I want to continue to add like selection to that, hold on Control-Shift, and I'll click on this, this, and now I want the inverse of that. Or I could hold down Control and click, and then that'll mask that part. That'll work. If I want to bring everything back, I can hold down Control-Shift, and it'll bring everything back. Or if you wanted to do the inverse, Control-Shift, and then click drag like that, Okay, so I'm just gonna hit undo to get that mask back. Control Shift click, and that'll bring the arms back. And then now I'll put it on the move. And now I'll hold down Alt, and then click and drag this to the center of where the elbow would be, right here, and hold down Alt, and I can change the rotation point of that. And I can even hold down Alt and then rotate this orientation. So again, it's like I'm setting up this temporary bone. And so now I can start to rotate these things like this. And maybe I've got some kind of structure like that, right? Okay. So at that point, what I would like to do is show you this one other thing. So normally when we put on move, we can move the entire thing, right? Now if we go into our brushes, we tap B and then go to M, and then we can do a move topological. If I find that here, right here. If you do that, it actually looks at the geometry boundaries on here. So we know that this is object, this is object. So watch. If I click on this piece first, I can click and I can start to manipulate just that shape alone. So I can start to manipulate this and tweak this thing out and maybe give a little bit more weight towards the bottom of this. So I think that's a really cool way to work with some of these individual pieces that we got going on here. Like if I just want to work with this and start turning that into more of that hand shape, or maybe I'm doing this with the wrist and pulling that down, and I want to work with the individual fingers right in through here. Let me hit undo for that, and let's just smooth this thing out just a little bit. Pull this up. Yeah, so this lets you just work on those individual parts and pieces, and makes it kind of easier to manipulate at that point. So it's going to finesse these just a little bit. I'm going to pull the back side of this thing out for a tricep shape here. Like that. And I'll pull this forward just a little bit for a bicep shape. Kind of like that. And depending on, like, obviously the size that you want everything, you know, you could keep working with this to manipulate these things a little bit more. But after you get this set up, this could become like a little mannequin structure that you could use at the very beginning of your projects. So it's going to inflate. So I need to build a mask for that, and I'll inflate this just to make that a little bit larger, like that. Okay, and so I can keep remeshing. I could smooth on this stuff, and if I'm ready, let's see if I'm going to go back to B, tap B for that, and then do the move topological. I just want to change a little bit about this thumb structure. And I'm going to try to click on that and then build that out a little bit more. So I think you got a lot of flexibility with how you're going to work with these parts and these pieces in this way. And if you are happy with everything, which I am not quite happy yet, I want to do this and maybe pull this down just a little bit. Push that in, pull that down. Yeah, so we're good to go like that. And again, I can just remesh, but then if I'm ready, maybe I'll do this just to keep these around. I'll duplicate them, I'll hide these, and then maybe rename this arms join. And then at that point, then we can do what we were doing before. We can go to geometry, dynamesh, turn off the groups, dynamesh these things together, and now it's a one-piece model. And I can smooth out the transitions of this. And then at that point, I'm free to start using any of the normal sculpting tools that we would normally sculpt with. And I've got a pretty good base and a good foundation to start working with on here. Last thing I'll show you is when you're working with high resolution of dynamesh, you might want to have a stronger smooth. You can tap the command key, you can go to brush, and you can go to the smooth folder and use the smooth stronger. And that will give you a stronger smooth brush to work with these things. And yeah, then at that point you're working with higher resolution dynamesh stuff, and you can see this method that we used gave us a nice little foundation to start building our anatomy structure over the top of, like this. Okay, so I hope this gives you some ideas of how you could potentially use these tools to your advantage at the very beginning for the blocking stages.